What's the rule your employer implemented that backfired terribly? This happened at a software company that I worked for. There was a new director of tech support, and the company had received complaints from some customers about the quality of support. The director decided the problem was productivity, so he instituted a policy where the support analysts would be judged primarily by how many cases they closed. He also changed the structure of the support organization. It had been a two-tier system, in which the less experienced analysts handled the initial customer contact. If it was a hard case that required more expertise, the case would be handed off to a more experienced analyst. The director got rid of the second tier of support, and made the more experienced analysts handle initial customer contacts regardless of what type of case it was. The director announced these changes in a meeting where he announced that some support analysts had been fired, and that anyone who didn't like the new way of doing things could leave. He was trying to frighten his employees into compliance. Unfortunately, he succeeded. The first change caused most analysts to close cases as quickly as possible, regardless of whether the problems were actually solved or the customer was satisfied. The second change meant that many of the more difficult cases went unsolved, because there was no second tier of support for less experienced analysts to appeal to. The result was a bunch of angry customers. The new director had taken an organization with a few problems and broken it completely. Also, the morale of the organization tanked, because most people want to be able to do their jobs effectively and to be recognized and rewarded for their abilities. Many years ago I worked as a contractor on a software project that had a concrete deadline. If we missed the deadline, there would be a fine of about $80,000 a day. Every Monday morning, I would submit my time card for the preceding week. Sometimes I would be in on weekends to chase bugs down etc. After the third consecutive week of submitting a 60-hour time card, the project manager told me that I was no longer allowed to work more than 40 hours a week without prior written authorization. I agreed. The next week, my 40 hours were up at 11 a.m. on Friday and I left. That night, the test database had some issues which blocked all testing. The test folks worked on nights and weekends. This was before cell phones were prevalent. The same project manager called and left increasingly desperate messages on my home answering machine, before it ran out of tape, which I completely ignored. Come Monday and I am whistling my way into the office and the project manager buttonholes me and demands to know why I did not pick up my phone. I said that I had gone traveling because I had not had a single day off for the previous 3 months. Plus, without written authorization, I was not allowed to work a single minute above 40 hours. Once she realized that I was as ornery as her, she apologized. That week's time card came to 80 hours and she never questioned my time cards again. Smile. A new boss, who had never done my job, arrived and immediately tried to make her mark. She changed the filing system and the annual leave booking system and moved the photocopier on the first day. That was a big deal in that office, believe me. On the second day she called a staff meeting and told us very gruffly that absolutely everything we did had to be run by her first. So every time a customer appeared we were to go to her and get the request authorized. She very quickly had a queue at her desk and found herself unable to get her own job done due to the constant interruptions. After about an hour she exploded and shouted, "Can't you lot do anything without me?" Loud enough for the waiting customers to hear. She then called an emergency staff meeting to tell us how useless we all were and that she may as well do everything herself. When someone pointed out to her that we were only doing what she had asked us to do, she rolled her eyes and stomped off to her office. She lost our respect after that and it would never have worked out. Fortunately, a customer complained about her rudeness to the regular staff. Our customers were like friends, and she was fired within the month. We got a nice new boss after that. My employer changed the formula for how sales staff commission was calculated. Previously the formula was a certain percentage of the profit on the sale. The new formula was a smaller percentage of the total price of the sale. That quarter the factories were busy, and sales volume reports were looking terrific. Travel requests were getting approved, and statements were issued to investors about gains in market share. The stock price climbed. Suddenly 2 months into the quarter the mood changed. Those of us on the R&D side who were planning to attend a major conference were told to cancel. The supply cabinets would not be restocked. What happened? It turns out that the new incentive plan had a side effect that should have been obvious. Rather than spending hours or days negotiating with customers toward a price that gave us a good profit, our sales staff were going into negotiations with opening bids at or even below cost. Sure, that meant a little lower commission than if they made the sale at the typical profit, but it meant that they were almost guaranteed to win the bid rather than risking losing the bid to our competitors, as happened half the time, so their net commissions increased. Sales volume increased, factory output and shipments increased, but profits plummeted. They went back to the previous commission formula immediately.